Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's episode of the RPM Rundown podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Kmita. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a great show lined up for you today. A lot of current events we're going to talk about, some really good content. Thank you very much for being here and taking part. But first, before we start off with our very special guest, we do have a very special announcement to make. We know we talk a lot about external news and what's going on out in the marketplace, but this is some news that affects us personally. We have forged a brand new partnership with one of the major players over in the post-recovery space, MBSI. Many of you probably know the name, know who they are. We recorded a very special message to tell you a little bit more about our partnership. Go ahead and take a look. Abby Goss, thank you so much for jumping on this call.
Happy to be here. Thank you for including me.
You are very welcome. Do you have any big plans for Memorial Day?
My plans for Memorial Day, very traditional, going to the beach with my son and my dog, which you've seen on calls before.
That I have.
Mr. Fluff. He's not here now because I haven't picked him up from the center, but if he was here, I'd bring him up here.
Yeah. Well, maybe next time we can do that. I'm excited about Memorial Day, but what I'm even more excited about is our new partnership with MBSI. So that is something new. I was hoping you could take a minute and kind of tell everyone a little bit about our partnership.
Sure. Maybe I'd start with a little bit about MBSI. So one thing that I love to point out is no one knows what the name means. No one knows what MBSI means. So let's get that on tape. It is Mobile Business Systems Incorporated. Our product name is Recovery Connect. So most people you talk to, if you use the word Recovery Connect, they will know us in the industry as an asset or repossession platform. And our partnership allows our lender base to access services through various transporters. And you guys were our first market transporter that we signed under our partnership program. So what we're trying to do is bring other industry leaders that are servicing different portions of the repossession, call it spectrum, and bring them in-house so that we have a friendly relationship, whether it be sharing data, sharing contacts and the relationships that we have in the space. We thought that this would be a good synergy to have, and that's where we got started.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I think there's a lot of synergy there as well, because obviously you have a really large market share. You're a really well-known company that has a really good long-standing reputation. And there's obviously that really big emphasis on technology, which we've made a lot of internal investments in as well. So that was one of the reasons we were so excited to go ahead and partner with you. But obviously with our partnership now, it's inked, it's done, we're moving forward with it. How do you see that kind of helping the post-recovery space? And what sort of value do you see that bringing to the mutual partners that we both work with?
Sure. So everything in our ecosystem is obviously data-driven, and there's always a hunger for more data, not just the raw data, but data that's been processed, analyzed. And a lot of times when the process is fragmented because so many hands are in the pot, you have the lender that entered the order, you have the folder that it might have been assigned to, you have the agent, you have a company like us that's a system of record, you have transporters, you have people that cut keys. There's so many hands that are involved in taking that car from the borrower to auction that if the data is not making sense in a central place, at times it can be hard to make decisions based on that data. So what we're excited about with RPM is you guys are a data warehouse for moves and days to move and where your trucks are and all the things that I'm still learning about the transport piece. But I think the value to our clients is you guys can take that data and marry it and put it in a presentable manner where there's actionable the word
I think steps you could take, right? There's actionable processes, there's actionable things that they can do to put that into action.
Yes, absolutely. So that's what I'm very excited about. And when we've been talking to our lender base and our clients about this partnership, that's one thing that we continue to highlight is what they will be able to do with that data and then make better decisions on who they're using to move the cars and where it's going and all of those fun things.
So that's one of the things I think we've been talking about internally as well, is there's so many things that align amongst our organizations. You being tech forward, right? You having that data focused approach. And is really where we've been able to go to our customers and say, hey, look, we've really been able to go ahead and now provide a solution that streamlines processes through the post-recovery space that can take a lot of those unknowns or a lot of those questions and almost just turn them into an automated process that can get your vehicles from the repo yard to the auction, that can get your vehicles from the consumer's location to the repo yard, get the key scout, all those different things. I think that there's a lot that maybe we haven't uncovered yet as we continue to talk to more customers out in the marketplace and we hear their feedback, but it's been very positive so far. I will say though, with all those different moving parts, a lot of times there can be a lot of questions. So if someone wants to learn more about MBSI or wants to learn more about our partnership, what would be the best way that they can do that?
Sure, where they can chase you or me down at a conference, because we've been to quite a few together this year.
We are at a lot of them, aren't we?
I am looking forward to a tiny break from the conference circuit. However, obviously on our socials or LinkedIn, the most generic way would be our website. But yeah, if you find me or Andrew on LinkedIn, we're more than happy to discuss it. We will be talking about it a lot, probably posting about it a lot. So yeah, happy to answer any questions, any curiosities around it. And this whole process with you and your team, Andrew, I would like to highlight, you guys have been so forthcoming into speaking about where you are knowledgeable in the space and filling in some of the gaps. Because, you know, when we sit on this side of the technology piece, yeah, we're out in the field with the agents and the forwarders, but like the transport piece to me personally has been like a really mystical, that I didn't have like the knowledge behind how it happens, you know, like I'm still looking for an RPM truck on the road because I'm like, I never thought about these things before. Like these cars have to get from here to here. So it's been nice to learn throughout the process. And we're excited with y'all's team and all of the resources that you guys have brought to the table. It's been great. So thank you.
You're welcome. And the feeling's definitely mutual. We appreciate that transparency on your end as well. And for anyone out there who wants to get more information, especially since our partnership was, I should say, recently publicly announced, finding those press releases both on the web as well as on LinkedIn, you shouldn't have to look very far to find those. So Abby, thank you so much for jumping on. I hope you and your family and Mr. Fluff, most importantly, enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully he gets the chance to eat a lot of dropped hot dogs off the grill and really enjoy the weekend.
I am feeling a puppy tummy ache. Come on. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a happy one as well.
Thanks, Abby.
Bye.
Welcome back to this month's edition of the RPM Rundown. Joining me today is a very special internal guest, Tony Cottrell, Vice President of Carrier Sales. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate having me on. Just to give you a little background about myself, I've been in logistics industry for 14 years now, 8 of which have been at RPM. I'm VP of Carrier Sales here, and I'm proud to be a guest on your show here and talk a little bit about current events.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. And for those who might not be too, I should say, into the minutia of how a non-asset-based brokerage works like ourselves, the Carrier Sales team is really unique and really important as part of the process. Can you tell me a little bit about the impact that your team has in terms of the functionality of our business and how really you're responsible for getting freight to and from and where it has to go?
Yep. We are the engine that drives the brokerage forward. In particular, Andrew, we are the product that the customer sales team sells into. We actually move the stuff. I like to tell the customers when I get an opportunity to be customer facing that we don't move loads, we cultivate relationships with carriers, and a byproduct of that relationship is the fact that we might move a load for a customer. I think we forget that we call them carrier sales reps, right? They are selling, they are cultivating relationships, and strategically in a geographic area, hopefully to service the freight that you get and you can put on our open board. Typically when I've had the pleasure of going alongside customer sales reps on customer facing visits, I enjoy pulling back the veil of what the strategy is on how we cover loads, why we cover loads, the way we do things at RPM. It's very fun to talk about. It's very fun to sell to customers. It's a good time.
Yeah. Sounds more like a carrier relationship representative, if you ask me.
Yes. Yeah. Bullet point number 1 on the carrier up job description is that we expect you to cultivate relationships with carriers. That is literally the first one because it's the most important aspect of the job. Anybody can just pick up a phone and call a carrier. Anybody can get a rate. It's whether or not it's the right carrier for the right load at the right rate with the right service. And that gets more complex.
Definitely. Well, I can tell you on the sales side, when we set that expectation up front, that follow through is really the most important thing, because we have to be able to back up what we say. And we really do appreciate your department a lot, and especially the tenure you've had here at RPM. And I know that it's very appreciated across the board. So a couple of things I want to talk about today. I don't know if you've been kind of keeping up with current events, reading what's out there, but I actually have got something kind of interesting I want to start with today, from a pretty unlikely place. I don't know about you, but how often are you getting news from government websites?
Not so often, but they do come across my desk every once in a while.
Yeah, it was the same kind of thing. I actually saw a post that kind of came across my LinkedIn feed that I thought was really interesting. The government of Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Actually, so what they did is they ran a bit of a sting operation out on the highways, looking at different trucks, whether it was an auto carrier, whether it was a freight carrier, et cetera. And they pulled over a total of 332 trucks over a 3-day period. Again, pretty small sample set, but again, at the randomness of the whole operation, was pretty impactful. So I guess I'll ask you up front, how do you think that went overall in terms of how do you think it was a pretty compliant type of operation, or do you think there was some pretty big findings?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of articles out there from a lot of sources about Blitz Week, DOT Week, and I think there's a lot of names for it. And yes, we read about it, but most importantly, I think in my role, we feel it. We feel the impact and we strategize around it. We know that capacity may take a dip during those times. Carriers will choose to park their trucks rather than be out servicing their own customers out of fear of getting shut down. Thankfully, those are not carriers that RPM likes to work with. All of our relationship-based carriers were out on the road servicing our customers. But in particular, what we plan around is the fact that we actually see an influx of spot quotes coming towards RPM during these times, because somebody out there is failing on their primary load because a driver or a carrier chose not to run their truck during a DOT check week, which means it goes out to spot market, which means it comes across your desk, Andrew, which means you spot quote it, it gets on my radar, and we have our quote unquote get our foot in the door moment with a new customer. So like we do every year, we saw an influx in spot quotes. We were prepared for it. We talked to our relationship-based carriers, understood what type of loose capacity was there outside of what they were typically running for us. And I think we did a good job executing. Yeah. It doesn't come without a lot of stress too.
No, not at all. Well, not much in this world doesn't have stress associated with it. But it's, I think the answer to that is what you said, where it doesn't really affect us too much because we're very particular and we're very on top of making sure we procure the right carrier base. And we're very big on making sure that they're compliant within the standards we set forward. But in that article, again, from the government of Saskatchewan, I was shocked, to say the least, at some of the figures that they pulled out of this. So get this, out of the 332 stops they did, 332 trucks that they pulled over, 103 of them, 31%, had to be removed from the road due to cargo securement and brake issues. Scary. 16 drivers, 4.8%, removed due to violating the hours of service limit, false records, license endorsements, or drug impairment. It could have been any of those four, but that's how they loop them together. 81 were discovered with mechanical defects that require immediate repair, and 148 trucks or power units passed inspection. So think about it that way. Less than half of what they pulled over were technically compliant to be on the road. If your freight is going cross country, cross province, cross state, wherever it's headed to, do you want to deal with that headache if for some reason the carrier is suddenly out of compliance with what's roadworthy?
Yeah. Actually, those statistics are shocking to me too. Those are much higher than I would have expected. Here's the good news about RPM, Andrew. We judge our carrier sales reps by owned carrier relationships, right? We have a set of KPIs that dictate whether or not a carrier relationship is owned or not. In other words, it's a way for us in carrier management to understand if this is a good quality carrier who meets our minimum standards to conduct business with, and whether or not our carrier sales rep has a quality working relationship with his organization. Now, I define that because 700 carrier relationships at RPM haul 70% of our volume here. And that might be a staggering stat to some people. I think that's a much higher ratio than you would see at other brokerages our size doing 400 million in top line revenue. But why I'm proud of that is because there's 250,000 registered over the road truckload carriers. In fact, there's actually way more than 250,000, but 700 of them we have identified as elite carriers who are qualified enough to service our customers. And I can tell you that those elite 700 carriers that we work with, they don't have brake problems outside of normal wear and tear. Of course, we all know that operating a truck is tough from a mechanical standpoint, but to have negligent equipment on a road, that is not something we see with our carrier relationships with any one of those 700 owned carriers. And by the way, our carrier network expands far beyond that 700. We have over 15,000 registered carriers with RPM. But like any good brokerage, we are tiering our carriers based off of KPIs and metrics, and that A squad per se of that 700, they do 70% of our lifting while we're constantly developing out and trying to add to that.
Yeah. And I think the thing that, to be honest, really frustrates me a lot is especially on the front end side of the business where I'm at and a lot of the conversations I have, everyone always thinks they have it figured out, so to speak, right? Oh, that's fine. I just go to central dispatch to post loads. I go to super dispatch and I just find XYZ carrier that'll take it for me. And again, in a lot of cases, there's nothing wrong with doing that, which is what works for your business. But the thing is when you have that foresight to look ahead, it's not about the here and now of can I get this load from A to B? You always have to think worst case scenario. And I think a lot of times customers don't, especially new customers, may not really understand why the RPM process is so important in terms of vetting carriers and keeping them safe and on the road. If these statistics go ahead and translate over to the US market, which in many cases they do, you going and finding random carrier online gives you a 1 in 3 chance that your freight might not make it to that destination safely. And look, I understand repairing brakes on trucks are expensive, but you know what's more expensive? Having damaged cargo. And my bet is that if that carrier can't afford to fix their brakes to make them compliant, what's the chances that they're carrying the level of insurance that's needed to make sure they can indemnify your freight if something goes wrong?
Yeah, Andrew. So we're in a position where we're hiring new carrier sales reps right now. And I'm actually going to tell a story. I just got out of an interview yesterday with a prospect who said he learned at his previous brokerage he worked at. It's a post and pray model where he was literally paid to sit there and answer call-ins off of public websites. Needless to say, an offer was not extended to that individual, going back to our earlier points of we create good relationships with good carriers. I cannot sleep at night knowing that loads are being posted and random carriers are hauling our most important customers' loads. We have to protect it with the relationship. We have to tender it to known carriers who we understand their service levels. We are grading them and scoring them. We have met them before. These are all prerequisites before we are tendering our customers and most important loads over to them. So there's a lot of bad brokering in our industry. I think over 30,000 registered brokers and who knows how many unregistered sitting in people's basements somewhere. But out of those 30,000, there's a lot of bad people that give brokers a bad name. RPM is lucky enough to be in that 1% of that 1% of that list, being a $400 million company. And we're very proud of our minimum carrier standards and in particular, the standards we hold our carrier sales reps to.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really important point. You know, doing things the right way really goes a long way, to say that at least. But thinking back to something you had mentioned about how we properly use our carrier capacity, those 700 carriers that are moving around 70% of our freight, it got me thinking about a different article I had read recently as well. And I guess we'll say it's almost in the vein of diversification. Obviously, the way that we protect ourselves, our interests, and our customers' interests is by making sure we have a strong, diversified network that can go ahead and service the way that we expect them to. But it got me thinking about some other areas of the industry that maybe aren't as diversified and some of the things that can happen with that. So you remember the OEM chip shortage, right? And I'll say from an OEM perspective, really nothing you could do.
Yep.
You know, it all came down to manufacturing. And the reason that became an issue is because of the lack of diversification in manufacturing. Pop quiz for you. Advanced microchip manufacturing. Most of it comes from Taiwan. What percentage of the market do you think is produced just in Taiwan alone?
Let me shoot at 67%.
You are so close. It's insane. It's actually 92. So, but think about it. 92% of advanced chips out there, most of which go into vehicles, computers, et cetera, are all coming from the same place. If you look at a natural disaster, if you were to look at, even if you were to look at government or civil unrest that's currently been going on there, the threat of war, et cetera, those supply chains are suddenly drastically reduced. How do you see that concept translating into our business and into our industry?
Yeah, we've already seen nearshoring hyper expand over the last couple of years, especially post-COVID. Long story short, Andrew, if you're working at a Fortune 500 company here in the United States and your supply chain is dependent on companies across the planet on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, you are trying to shorten that now. You're moving your operations to Mexico, somewhere closer, anywhere closer, which is why we've seen Laredo become we have seen Laredo become the busiest port in America, overtaking LA last year. So it's just smart logistics finally. And that nearshoring boom, we have seen an influx of volume northbound and southbound out of Mexico, especially compared to pre-COVID levels as we build out our Mexico product. We're very proud of that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great. And, I'm not sure, again, you and I have both been in logistics for a while. I've got a pretty unique background where I worked for an asset-based carrier and now I work for a non-asset-based carrier. So it gives me kind of that unique perspective of seeing both sides. And I remember when I was on the asset side, there'd be customers that were like, hey, we want to use your vehicles to do X, Y, and Z. So you'd find the one driver that runs that one route, and that's what he does. But timing's important. Getting freight picked up on time is important. Suddenly the truck has a problem. So what's the backup plan? Well, I'm limited to what I can do to physically have that truck where it needs to be. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. What's that fallback option? And that's where I feel like being a non-asset provider really gives us the flexibility to say, hey, in the face of adversity, in the face of unforeseen challenges, it's really easy to level up and have that backup option ready to go because we're managing quality standards, not managing the name on the side of a truck.
Yeah. Great point to make, Andrew. And the way we are reacting to these market shifts is we're looking at beefing up our routing guides, really getting quality depth on our most dense corridors. In other words, we are feeling a slight upward pressure in rate out there. Capacity is starting to tighten. And again, this isn't an overnight light switch type of a shift we're feeling. It's a slow trickle, and we feel that upward pressure. And all indications from our customer base points towards this Q4, it getting a little bit tighter, and into 2025, potentially maybe another bull run in logistics where we start to see the equilibrium of capacity and price start to equal out. But what are we doing to prepare for that? What are we doing to service our customers' volume that they continue to tend to us? We're beefing up our routing guides, right? It's actually no longer acceptable just to have a backup option. You should have a tertiary option as well, right? You should have as much depth as humanly possible that is possible to develop on good, trustworthy carriers. So we read the market shifts here at RPM. We try to get ahead of it. We understand that, in all honesty, we didn't have to have anything outside of a two-carrier routing guide for much of the last 18 months as it's been relatively slow, and we've seen rates continue to dip and capacity be plentiful. But as we look into our little logistical crystal ball here at RPM, we can see that it's time to beef up these routing guides, and that's how we're going to get ahead of it.
Yeah, so it's almost like establishing a batting order now. You're on deck, you're in the hole, and then I don't remember what the next one is.
Yes,
but
correct.
You've got the other 6, 7, 8 players lined up ready to go just in case, which is very smart.
Correct. That's a very good analogy. And again, it goes back to buy-in from our carriers and understanding that they are a part of a routing guide, and there's minimum acceptance criteria in participating with that. I think we do a good job of of treating our customers' freight like it's a privilege to be able to haul those loads as opposed to a right? We understand that the trucking companies, they need the volume to keep the wheels turning, to pay the bills, to turn a profit. But not all freight is treated equal, right? And we like to say that it's a privilege to haul for RPM. It is a privilege to move our customers' loads. And we sell that to our carriers, and it allows us to get more depth onto our routing guides. They are eager to prove themselves on why they should be primary on certain lanes. And so we see that internally here at RPM.
Yeah. And I think we're eager to go ahead and help maintain and build the equity and the brand identity and the reputations of our carriers as well. I think that's something that's really important. And I'm not sure if you ever read overdriveonline.com.
I have, yes.
Yeah, they do post some pretty good articles here and there. And as you were talking about that, I read one recently that was talking about the kind of the short-term exodus of some smaller carriers and kind of the fear that sits over the heads of some other carriers that might be out there just due to interest rates getting more expensive, the volatility of fuel, just again, kind of that instability in the marketplace, that big swing between supply and demand as we start to get back towards normalcy. What would be, I guess, your words of advice to any carriers that are out there listening that are kind of looking for more stability within their routing guides or within their general workflow?
Andrew, I think my advice to a small carrier would be to lean on your relationship with your sales rep. I understand that a small carrier probably has no ability to sign up direct and run for a Fortune 500 company. The only way they're going to get access to that freight is through a brokerage. Lean on your sales rep. Develop a relationship with your sales rep. Understand our minimum KPIs that we have in order for you to get access to that freight. If you want to be in that club of the 700 owned carriers we have at RPM, it is very clearly defined on what you need to execute on to get access to that. So, and it doesn't start without that relationship. And by the way, for as hard as I press on my carrier sales reps to cultivate the relationship with those carriers, again, if I am a small owner op and I'm trying to carve my way out in this wide world of logistics and trucking, I am going to go equally as hard at that brokerage, at that person who is my assigned carrier sales rep. I'm going to cultivate a relationship with them, understand what we care about most, and try to execute for us.
Yeah, so I think the synergy of that is so important. So what I would do is I would encourage really any carrier out there that's interested in getting involved in our ecosystem, or at least learning what those KPIs and what those processes look like to potentially become a partner, explore if there is a fit, because some carriers are the right fit for us and we're not the right fit for some carriers, right? But definitely I would say go on rpmmoves.com, go to the contact us section, make sure you reach out and try to find a way. Highly encourage it, really for anyone, customers and carriers alike, just so they can kind of see how the ecosystem works and see if there might be an opportunity for them there.
Yeah, call us. Call the main line. Press 1 if you're an auto carrier. Press 2 if you haul freight. Our sales reps are ready to talk to you guys, and let's see if we can do business together.
Well, Tony, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your insight, and most importantly, best of luck with your fabric laying this weekend.
Andrew, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Hopefully we'll have you back soon. An invite might be coming your way.
Maybe.
And for those of you listening at home, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the RPM Rundown podcast. Make sure you tune in again next month because we'll be doing it all over again. Keep an eye out as well. We have our quarterly live stream that we'll be posting later on in June. You can find that, of course, on our social channels at RPM Moves. I'm your host, Andrew Kmita. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next month.